You guys will find out who's going to advance right after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
Welcome back to another episode of Clutch Gene Sports. This is your host Marco with my boy Rohan. How's it going, Rohan?
We're doing good. How about you, man?
Hey man, can't complain. Gonna be spending the game with my father for his birthday. A lot of people gonna be there renting out a hall. Making it a big event, man. That's what football does, man. Brings people together. That's the best part of football, man. Actually, sports in general, to be honest.
Yeah, no disagreement there. It's always fun when you're watching with a group of people. I probably will do the same this weekend because it's going to be a fun weekend, really. 2 games for us.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm excited because end of the day, to be honest, so the way I look at it is, do I think the 49ers is capable of winning? That'll be answered later. But no matter what, absolutely no matter what anyone says, you got to be pretty damn happy about what this team did this year. Think about it. Week 1, it's a monsoon. They lose a close game. Week 2, their starting quarterback, who they traded up for in the 2021 draft, gets hurt. He's done for the season. Jimmy Garoppolo, who wasn't supposed to be on the team, starting games. The 49ers they start off the season 3-4. He gets hurt after 7 starts, I believe. Next thing you know,
around there.
Brock Purdy comes in. Everyone thought the season was over. The 49ers are, I believe, 8-3, I believe, at the time. Believe that was around the record they were. Against Miami Dolphins. Gets hurt. A lot of people thought the season was over. I thought the season was in limbo. I was like, what's going to happen? I know a lot of people who thought the defense was going to have to carry the 49ers the rest of the way. People thought that it was going to be a defensive and run game heavy. That was kind of the case in a sense. The defense carried the 49ers to a lot of wins. So people got to be pretty damn excited. I know for sure if we would have told people that the 49ers would be going to the NFC Championship with a potential chance to make the Super Bowl, people would have said we are liars. They would have called us crazy at the time.
And I mean, I was one of those people. I was a doubter. I remember I tweeted, when someone said, like way back when, that the 49ers could go on a run, I said that that's extremely unlikely. This was like after the Rams game, or no, before the Rams game when we were 3-4. Someone had said the 49ers could go on a run, and I just said that was unlikely. Well, I was wrong, and we've seen it. And so, yeah, it's going to be a fun time. I think Brandon Ayuk earlier this week said it best. I wrote an article about him today, and he said essentially, we're at the NFC Championship, going to the playoffs, going to the championship game. It's cool. We love it. We're in a great position right now. But also, we've got to talk about what Kali just put up on the board. Take 6. What's on the 49ers' minds right now? It isn't an NFC champion. Well, it is an NFC Championship game, but it's also the path going to the Super Bowl. That's the main thing on their minds. Brandon Ayuk said, we're looking to go out there, prove something to ourselves, prove it to everyone around the world who the 49ers are, and looking to handle business because they want that Super Bowl. They've missed the opportunity now twice. They've made it to the championship game 3 in 4 years. 0 Super Bowls to account for it. Could this be the year? Let's see.
So, like Callie says, shout out to Callie, shout out to 49ers Throwback. Get 6. I got 4 Super Bowl tickets chilling behind me. I was gifted a Joe Montana plaque, and it has 4 of the Super Bowls in there. Tickets, man, like witnessing 2 Super Bowls, man, and seeing 2 Super Bowl losses. I'm a big sports fan in general. I love basketball. Like any sport you put on, I love it. Basketball, baseball. I'd get into hockey. Like I love every sport. But like football, man, it's just different. Like growing up playing football, growing up enjoying every Niner game and going to Candlestick, like football just hits different, right? So like seeing those two losses in the Super Bowl for me were killer. So like absolutely, like Kelly says, man, go get six. Take six, man. Shout out to Federalist 45. It was extremely unlikely. Likely. It was unlikely. So was 12 in a row. But hey, who cares about 12 in a row? You got to go 1-0 this week, right, Rohan? That's the biggest.
Exactly.
So, Rohan, this game is became another essentially the way people were talking about the 49ers Dallas game. People were talking about, well, the 49ers have to slow down the Eagles. The 49ers defensive line isn't as good as the Eagles. The 49ers defense isn't as good as the Eagles. Their offense isn't as good as the Eagles. The Eagles this, Eagles that. What do you have to say about the way media is talking about this matchup? They're really talking about like if it is extremely favorable towards the Eagles.
I think that there are a couple of things that I want to address with this because I've seen a lot of takes where both 49ers and Eagles, both sides have brought up different things in the past to try and justify why their respective team might win, right? For the 49 or against the 49ers, people bring up they lost to the Bears. They lost early in the season. They have these certain losses. And for the Eagles, it's they lost to certain teams as well, right? And they suffered some poor losses on their own. Look, what I have to say about that and about all the national media talk, none of any of the outcomes of previous games matter. This game is completely different from the previous games, especially when you're referencing maybe the Kansas City Chiefs game in week 7. Both teams are way different than they were at the beginning of the season. Regardless of what the record says, the Eagles obviously have been consistent the entire year, but both teams have been better than that they were at the beginning of the season. And I think that it's important to note how this is a different environment as well. And so to me, I think all of that is just talk. I don't really take into account as much of that as a factor as to who's going to win this game. Really, it comes down to a couple of things. I think the talent on both sides is very, very comparable. We'll talk about that later, but it's going to come down to a mix of the better talent, the more physical and the more ready for this environment, and also the better coaching. And so I think that it's a number of factors, but really the point is it comes down to this one game. It's not a dependent on what the other how many ever games are. If you're in the NFC Championship, you're in the NFC Championship for the reason. So to me, I don't really buy into the talk about which team is favored, especially when you point out the fact that both teams are very loaded rosters on both sides of the football.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you because when you look at it, it's funny because like if it's 49ers media or 49ers content or fans or whatever, you see a lot of fans essentially talking about certain aspects of the Eagles, right? The run game, DVOA, who have they played defensively as an offense? They actually haven't played many good defenses in terms of DVOA, which is a statistic that ranks teams in general and it is a very one of the more accurate statistics out there, right? So when you're looking at that, you got fans talking about that, and then you look at the Eagles side and you got them talking about, oh well, you got a rookie quarterback. You guys have to stop Jalen Hurts. Our defensive line has 70 sacks. Like there's a lot of different like it's very weird because you got one side and then the complete other side, and like there is so far I have not seen the happy medium of people actually saying, have you guys thought about these are have been two of the best teams all season? Yes, Philly started off extremely hot. Extremely hot. They were one of the best teams in the league all season. And then Jalen Hurts gets injured, and then they fall off for a couple games, and they lose a couple games in a row. The 49ers are opposite. They started cold. They got hot. Like, these are two different teams. What happened in the beginning of the season does not matter because what the 49ers were in the beginning of the season, they are not the same team. What happened 5 weeks ago with when the Eagles played against the Dallas Cowboys, the Saints, I see people talking about those games. Those don't matter. They didn't have Jalen Hurts. They didn't have their full roster. Let's look at the complete picture. Like these two teams are not comparable to the 49ers beginning of the season and Philly a couple weeks ago. What Philly did last week against the New York Giants was serious. What the 49ers did against Dallas, holding them to 12 points, was serious. These two teams match up very well. I don't get why people are saying the 49ers should dominate this game. The Eagles should dominate. Like, it's stupid to me, man. Like, am I going crazy, Rohan, or do you agree?
No, I do think I agree. And I mean, when you look at it, the number one thing to not necessarily the number one, but an important thing to look at the betting lines. Normally in betting lines, home teams are favored by 3 points. I think the line is exactly at 3 points. What does that tell you? Guess what? The betting lines think that this game is neutral. They think that it's a 50-50 toss up pretty much between the Eagles and the 49ers. And I do think as well, because when we talk about it, and I think it's a good time to get into it. Let's get into the position by position kind of part in terms of 49ers Eagles and see where each side is favored, because when you talk about at the end of it, I think that both sides have a strong matchup. There are going to be things that each team has to figure out, teams that each the parts that each team struggles with, but I don't think in no means that this should at least be considered a blowout pre-game. Now, obviously, one team can change their minds, one team can play poor football, but I think at the moment it seems like this is the ideal matchup, and it's why going into this going to the second half of the season when the 49ers started picking up steam, I said the Eagles are the matchup that you got to be most afraid of, and when you look at the records, guess what? The top two most loaded rosters in the NFC ended up being the top two seeds in the Eagles and the 49ers. They are not necessarily head to toe. I think that obviously in some areas, they're one team's better, some areas another team is better, but they're still overall rosters wise, they're comprised of similar talent. And I think that that's important because it's going to be tough because you have to essentially try and defeat talent that has been similar to yours.
Absolutely. So you said let's get into the position by position. You want to start defensive side of the ball, or do you want to start offensive side of the ball?
Let's go let's go defense first, we'll end with the offense.
Absolutely, because it is going to be a defensive matchup, in my opinion. I think defenses, whatever defense struggles the most, is the defense that's going to lose. Like I don't think these defenses are going to struggle. So let's start with secondary. All right, let's go corner. Let's go secondary in general. So corners and safeties, the nickelbacks. Who would you say has the better secondary right now?
I think I have to go the Eagles, and I have a huge respect for what the 49ers have done, with their or at least the secondary, how they've played, as of late, meaning Diamond Lenore really has stepped it up, right? 2 interceptions, pretty solid coverage overall, but when you talk about the 2 secondaries, not to slight on the 49ers, but the Eagles, their secondary is elite. It's the best secondary in football. When you talk about it, you've got 2 all-pro level cornerbacks or near all-pro level cornerbacks, Darius Slay, James Bradbury, that allows them to do a lot with their coverages and allows Jonathan Gannon to really sit in whatever coverage he wants and dial up the plays that he likes, be it quarters coverage, be it man coverage, cover 3, whatever it may be. I think that those 2 are really good. And then when you include the safeties, I think that while the 49ers might have an edge in the safety department, I think the overall gap isn't too significant. Avante Maddox, a nice slot corner as well. I think that that's vital. Jimmy Ward's there as well. I think both teams have solid slot corners. Chauncey Gardner Johnson, a versatile player. He's in that secondary as well. But I think the most important position is the cornerbacks. And I do think that Philadelphia has the better cornerbacks in this matchup. And I think that they're a little, I think that I give them the edge in this matchup.
I kind of agree with you, but I also disagree with you. So I'm gonna put it this way, right? So you say the 49ers secondary is a little bit less than the Eagles, which I don't mind. I don't mind that stance because in terms of coverage, I would give that to the Philadelphia Eagles. But then when you talk about tackling and stuff like that, it's absolutely the 49ers. The
Mm,
secondary from the
that's fair.
Philadelphia Eagles is afraid to tackle. It looks like they're not necessarily afraid, but they don't like to get their head in there. They don't like to get dirty, and that's what Kyle's going to make them do. So for me, when I'm talking about the secondary, I'm going to break it down into two different parts.
Let's go
Coverage
for it.
wise, coverage wise, I'm going Eagles, right? Because you got Darius Slay, which is one of the best corners in the NFL. You got James Bradbury. You got Gardner Johnson, who's a good corner. They're getting Avante Maddox back, so they got a good secondary. They're absolutely good when it comes to coverage. Now, tackling, not so good. 49ers, they
That's
like
fair.
to tackle. Their corners will come up and make a hit. Their safeties are very good tacklers, and they're able to come up and play the run. So that's what I'm gonna go Eagles. I'm gonna break it down. I'm gonna go Eagles. Secondary is better in coverage. 49ers are better against the run, but those two secondaries are two different kind of secondaries.
Right.
The way they're built. So the Eagles built their secondary in terms of the pass happy NFL. 49ers built their defense for a pass happy NFL, but knowing you're gonna have to run the ball and play playoff like football come January. So that's a two different style of defenses for built their secondary. So I'm not gonna really say one's better than the other because they do two different things well. But when I look at it, I gotta go the Eagles because of the
Oh, I
fact
thought
that
you were going to say 49ers. Okay.
no, so I gotta go Eagles because when you have Darius Slay, Gardner Johnson, you got James Bradbury, that's a good secondary. Now,
Mhm.
tackling is all about mentality, right? That's what tackling is when in terms of coming to secondary. And I think they're gonna come with that mentality because they're gonna have the crowd with them, they're gonna have that energy. But damn, having to tackle guys like Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, oh, Kyle's gonna test those guys. That's for sure.
And that is tough. And also, when I talked about it earlier this week in an article, I had mentioned cornerback safeties. I had split it into two. Thought the 49ers had the better safeties while the Eagles had the better cornerbacks because the 49ers have a better safety tandem. But I like your breakdown in that it's coverage and then safeties. I think, or sorry, coverage and then tackling, because I do think that that's the distinct difference between the two teams. The Eagles are probably the best coverage team in the NFL with the amount of cover players that they have both in the safety department and in the cornerback department. But the 49ers are a very good tackling team. And it's also a huge part of how they evaluate cornerbacks. Travarius Ward is the best tackling cornerback in the NFL. And that's why that was a part of the reason why they signed him. Deommodore Lenoir, a guy who can fit in the slot, that they essentially have a guy who fits in the slot well because of the way he can play in the slot with run fits and his ability to tackle. They have that on the outside. And then Jimmy Ward is very physical and also a very stout tackler. So their cornerbacks are good. We know Hufanga is a solid tackler, especially with the aggressiveness. And Sean Gibson, not a slouch himself. So I like the breakdown that you have. But yeah, good breakdown there.
So before everyone goes, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button on both channels. Now let's go straight to that. Shout out to everyone following. I see Zach in here, 49ers throwback, Steve O Supreme, so Supremo. I like the name. Federalist 45. Shout out to you guys. Make sure you guys drop comments and tell us your guys' confident level. You guys can answer these questions as well as going with us. Obviously, going linebackers. I'm gonna go first. There's no way. And if you say Eagles linebacker are better, I'm gonna have to drop you from the broadcast because that would be you going crazy on me, and I don't want that, right? Um, the linebacker group, Fred Warner is the best linebacker in all of football. Dre Greenlaw was a vote away from being an All-Pro linebacker, so the NFL gives him his respect. Now, when you're looking at T.J. Edwards and you're looking at I don't even know the other guy's name. What's his name?
Kaiser White, yeah.
Isaiah White. I
Kaiser
forgot why.
White.
Yeah, I forgot why I forgot his name. But those two guys they're not good. They're not great linebackers. They're average linebackers in the NFL. So I'm for sure going 49er linebackers by four. It's just that's easy. It's easy answer on that one for me.
I think this is the easiest answer that we're going to have in this entire battle. Maybe the second easiest when we get to a different position group. But overall, yeah, this is an easy one because the 49ers have the best linebacker tandem in the NFL. Just like the Eagles had the best cornerback tandem in the NFL, I think the 49ers have the best linebacker tandem in the NFL. And Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw are unmatched because they have different responsibilities but fulfill those responsibilities very well. Warner is the best linebacker in general in the NFL, so it's going to be tough to top that. And I think the reason that you not necessarily have questions, but the reason you do want to shed light is because linebackers are a team that Kyle Shanahan or a position that Kyle Shanahan likes to hit, regardless of who's playing there. Kyle Shanahan has done his job with linebackers. And I do want to point out though, TJ Edwards, very solid year here for the Eagles. He was a near Pro Bowl type of level corner. He was that type of good this year. But again, it's when you talk about tandems, it's tough to mention the entire group. Kaiser White, average. That's how I'd not name him. While Aziz Al-Shire, is a very strong third linebacker on any NFL team. And so to me, when you talk about the entirety of the group, easily San Francisco.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey JB, I see you in the comment section. We're gonna come back to the coaching, and I'll bring that comment back up later when we talk coaching later at the end of the show. Um, going going defensive line, man, that's hard, right? Because the 49ers defensive line, so it's deep, right? You got Nick Bosa, you got Arik Armstead, you can name a bunch of dudes. But when you look at that Philly D line, dude, it is deep. Like it's a different kind of deep. Like they have dudes who are third in fourth string players that would be starters on many other teams. So do the
Yeah.
49ers, but their guys are I think they have a better group of D line. I think their depth is better. But if you look at the starters, I think it's very, very similar. Like one of those to me, I would say they're equal. I think Nick Bosa equals it out. I think Arik Armstead in the playoffs and Arik Armstead, who he is a run defender and a pass rusher, kind of carries the load. And then you look at Hassan Reddick, you look at guys like Fletcher Cox, I believe he's still there. Not their main guy, but is it Hargrave? How do you say his
Javon Hargrave, yeah.
Hargrave? He's had a phenomenal season. So when
He
you're
is
looking at
so underrated. Javon
like so
Hargrave is really talented.
when you're looking at their D line, like they got Ndamukong Suh there, they got the rookie Jordan Davis out there. They also have another guy who had
Linval Joseph.
yes, Joseph out there. They have they have another defensive lineman. I cannot think of his name.
Robert Quinn.
Robert Quinn, they just traded for. So their D line is absolutely loaded, right? Now, when you look at the 49ers D line, it's loaded, but then when you start getting towards the back end of their D line, it's not as strong, right? So I'm going to say it's a toss up. I really do think it's a toss up. However, if you said Eagles, I wouldn't mind. If you said Eagles, I wouldn't mind if someone said 49ers. On this one, I can't say equal. So I'm going to have to go the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line. And it sucks to say that as a 49ers fan, but being 100% real with everyone, I think that defensive line is very good.
Yeah, I think that's fair. To me, I wrote about it earlier this week, and I said this position group is the hardest to grade. I said it was a toss-up in my article because when you talk about these two defenses, Philly, number two in yards by literally 1 yard per game, and 49ers, number one in yards allowed. But when you talk about it, it's a story of two tales. The Eagles have the better pass rush. The 49ers have the better run defense. The Eagles, they have a sack percentage of over 11%. The 49ers around the middle of the pack, about a 6.91% sack rate. But the 49ers only allow 77.7 yards per game on the ground, only 3.4 yards per attempt. That is phenomenal. The Eagles, they're near the bottom. They give up 121 yards per game and 4.6 yards per attempt. That's 21st in the NFL. So it does depend on what you value because both teams are comprised differently. And as for the depth issue, I think the way that I look at it, the Eagles have talent. But I also think that the 49ers depth shouldn't go unnoticed because I think that they fit the system well. I think that that's why the depth is the depth. Guys like Jordan Willis and guys like Charles Omenihu or whoever you want to name fit the system very well. Willis obviously is a run defender, Omenihu as a pass rusher, and you can name guys like Kerry Hyder and all. But I think overall, when you look at this, when comprising the depth and the starting level talent, I do think that the Eagles have the challenge here because when you talk about it, they have guys like Hassan Reddick, who is an elite pass rusher. They have interior guys in Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, and all in the interior. And then obviously on the outside, you've got Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Robert Quinn. I'm just talking about names here, but they're pretty darn good
But like
names. And
the thing is though, is you say names, but these dudes are actually very productive this year.
yeah,
Like they had I want to say 3 of their defensive linemen had 10 plus sacks on the year. So like
they were good. They were very
it's not
good.
just names. Like the production is there with these names versus the 49ers. They had one dude who hit 18 and a half sacks and everyone else, I believe, is under 7. So like the production is
Right.
there.
And by the way,
Philly
they
too.
didn't have 3. You're going to find this even funnier. They had 4. guys over 10 sacks this year.
Bro, that's
4.
even crazier. I think the 49ers have 48 sacks on the season, man. Like
Mhm.
their D line is so their D
Their
line.
entire starting defensive line had 49 sacks.
That's crazy. Dude. So think about it. Their D line is what the 49ers was in 2019. 49er fans,
Right.
I love you guys, but we still believe, a lot of fans still believe that the 49ers D line is 2019 level. It is not 2019 level at all, in my
But the
opinion.
thing is, 2019 level is also top heavy. This D line here, that's the difference. But on the topic, I do think that you've got to go with the Eagles based on the sack production and also based on the fact that in a pass heavy league, the Eagles have neutralized the number one attack, which is the passing game with the 70 sacks. Now, the D line could play a big factor in this game because in playoff football and in physicality, the run game is what matters. And that's where the Philadelphia Eagles have struggled a little more this year. And so that could be a huge factor in this game, which we talk about soon. But I do think when you talk about the overall production and what you've seen this year, you have to give it to the Eagles based on how successful of a season they had rushing the quarterback.
Absolutely. But if you talk about best D lineman in general, everyone's going Nick Bosa by far.
Correct.
For those Eagles fans that think Hassan Reddick is better, absolutely ridiculous. Um, Pressure rate. You look at all that, all the deep metrics. Hassan Reddick doesn't come close. So I don't when I see people throwing stats on Twitter, see people throwing stats in articles trying to compare Hassan Reddick to Nick Bosa. Don't do it. You look like a clown. To be honest with you, like I'm not trying to be a jerk or anything. You really do. You're talking about the defensive player of the year versus a guy who gets a lot of sacks because of the guys around him, and he gets pressures from the inside that force guys right into his lap. I'm just saying how it is. Nick Bosa is 10 times better than Hassan Reddick. I shouldn't say 10 times, but like I would say about 5 times better. Um, Going over to the offensive side of the ball. You want to go offensive line because if we go offensive line, that's two very good groups.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
I'll
start
let you go. I'll
offensive
let
line
you
and
go
go that
first.
way. All right. I went with the Eagles. I think the Eagles have the better offensive line. I think they have an argument for the best offensive line. Right tackle in football. A lot of people have been talking about Jordan Mailata being a weak link. They don't understand
Oh,
it.
he's a
Jordan
stud.
Mailata is one of the best left tackles in football in general. Probably top, maybe I don't know about top 5, probably top 10, 100% top 10. Jordan Mailata is not a weak link. Just Google an image of Jordan Mailata and you'll understand that he's not a weak link. That is a massive human being with his ability to move as well. But it's not only the tackles. I mean, Landon Dickerson is a strong guard. Jason Kelsey's the best center in football. They've got a good offensive line. Now,
Best in the NFL.
yeah, that's what I said. Now, the reason that we want to bring up this debate is because the 49ers, a lot of people don't like their offensive line. A lot of people don't. A lot of people try and talk about their offensive line in a poor manner. But I think that they have an above average offensive line. Coming into the year, I said I would be very surprised. After what I saw in training camp, I said I would be very surprised if this 49ers offensive line was not a top 15 offensive line in the NFL, maybe even top 10. And I think that they are on the bridge of that top 10 unit. I think that they're a fairly strong unit. And while they fluctuate at times for sure, I think they have a good unit. Trent Williams, the best offensive lineman in football in general. But then when you look at it, Aaron Banks, pretty solid year. Pretty solid year. Mike McGlinchey, a lot of people don't like him. Mike McGlinchey does a lot of good. He does some bad for sure, but he does a lot of good. I highlighted it in the film review this week. We saw how Mike McGlinchey, a lot of people post the picture of Mike McGlinchey and Micah Parsons, obviously, but Mike McGlinchey paved the way for some of the biggest runs for the 49ers in this past game and also held up well in part. Parsons beat him for sure, a good amount of times, but McGlinchey held up, and the point is he's an above average offensive lineman, and I think the 49ers have an above average unit. Just saying. That, though, does not compare to the Eagles, who have the best unit in the NFL.
Absolutely, the Eagles have the best unit in the NFL by far. Like to me, you look at their entire offensive line, and it's very, very good. Um, Now, but you got Trent Williams, you got a good guard tandem in Aaron Banks and Spencer Burford. Now, Lane Johnson is, in my opinion, the best right tackle in the NFL. Jordan Mailata is good at better then Trent Williams at one thing and one thing only, and that's singing. For some people that I've seen from the Philadelphia
Zach
Eagles
said it.
side,
Jordan has pipes too. Dude can sing.
exactly, man. Like so, for some Eagles fans, I've seen some Eagle fans are like, oh, Trent Williams can't even reach Jordan Mailata's name. Like, first of all, no, Jordan Mailata can sing better, but that's about it. All right, like that's to me. I'm giving credit to that Eagles O line. They're a good O line. They're the best in the NFL. But the 49ers offensive line, you don't got to have the best O line in the NFL to win Super Bowls. You absolutely don't. You got to have a top 10, top 15 offensive line. I think the 49ers have a top 10 offensive line in the NFL right now. And that is because of the young guards that came in and had a stellar season and had great for a couple games in the postseason so far. Which people don't give them credit for it. But Aaron Banks was able to bust by 49er fans. Put some respect on his name. That guy has had a hell of a season. Spencer Burford, I've said it during training camp. He has Pro Bowl talent. If he could put it all together, he will one day be a Pro Bowl player, whether that's at right tackle or at guard. He has the Pro Bowl talent. He needs to just put it all together, and he had a great first year. Going about the rest of the team, right? Running backs. Miles Sanders versus Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey all day, every day. Not even a debate. Elijah Mitchell, Miles Sanders. Probably going to lean towards Elijah Mitchell, and that's me being straight honest. Like, because Elijah Mitchell is a better route runner, is better out of the backfield. He can run the ball as effective. So, in my opinion, I think the 49ers have a much better ground game than the Philadelphia Eagles. Miles Sanders is a good running back. He was named to the Pro Bowl. I thought he shouldn't have been named to the Pro Bowl. That's just my opinion. I thought Tony Pollard was okay, but I thought Christian McCaffrey should have been named to the Pro Bowl over Miles Sanders. But looking at the run game, the ground game, I think the 49ers win that category. I think Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey are better than Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, and I believe Boston Scott. You can put all three of those guys compared to the other two I just named, and they're not going to be close to them. It just is what it is. You got one of the top three running backs in the NFL, Christian McCaffrey. So that's why that running back group is much better. Now, Christian McCaffrey is one of those weapons that could attack you in the run game, attack you in the pass game. I personally think that is going to be the deciding factor in this matchup. Who could run the ball effectively? If the 49ers could do so against a defense that I'm expecting is going to take away the run game completely, they're going to stack the box and force Brock Purdy to beat them in the pass game, because that is where Philly matches up well against the 49ers defensively. Then things could get a little shaky, and that's where I believe the 49ers could have issues. So I think the 49ers running back room is better, but the way they're going to be played, it might not look like they're the better running back duo, because they're going to have 8 in the box, possibly 9 every once in a while when they're blitzing. So I think that's going to be the key determining factor of who wins this game.
I think that you bring up a couple of different arguments. Now, I do think that Christian McCaffrey is the best running back of the entire two teams. I disagree. I do think that Miles Sanders does provide value. I think he's the second best running back in comparison to Elijah Mitchell. Mitchell does a lot of good things. I do value Miles Sanders over. Durability is a part of it, at least this year in general. But I mean, both are good running backs, and I do think Elijah Mitchell is right there at 3. I think Miles Sanders is a good running back. I just think that he's efficient when he gets carries, and he was underutilized at good portions of the time in early parts of his career. And so to me, that's fine. But I do think running back unit-wise, the 49ers have the better room, because obviously when you have the 1 and 3, Gainwell, Boston Scott, got to be in the conversation. They're probably number 4s and number 5s, or 4 or 5, whatever you want to rank them. I think that they're in the conversation. I mean, Jordan Mason's there as well. But regardless, 49ers have the better running back room. When you talk about, though, the running game in general, I do also tend to disagree. I don't know
Are you going to add Jalen Hurts to the run game for Philly?
I am. So if
Okay.
you were thinking about Jalen Hurts, that's the part I'll let you clarify after. But I do think that the run game, when you talk about the run game overall, I don't think that there's this big of a disparity. I think the run game is very similar. And I think the run game could also pose significant issues for the 49ers because of Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts adds so much to that running game. Philadelphia, that's why they ran, they had a top 5 rush offense this year. with 147.6 yards per game. And when you look at the most efficient offenses this year, I forget the exact 5 teams, but one of the 5 most efficient offenses each involved running quarterbacks or some quarterback to that caliber when you look at EPA per play. And obviously aside from the 49ers, but overall, I think that Jalen Hurts adds a lot on the ground, and that complements, especially in that zone read system, and makes it easier sometimes for the running backs, as well as that strong offensive line. When Jalen Hurts is back there as well, I think he adds a lot, and that added ability puts the running games hand in hand.
So I wasn't necessarily including Jalen Hurts in the run game in the sense of I was more so talking like running backs run game. But if you add Jalen Hurts, then it kind of equals it out because Jalen Hurts in the run game is one of the best running backs in my opinion. I think he is the best running back, but beside behind Justin Fields. In my opinion, I think people will like put Lamar Jackson ahead of him and stuff, but I think the way Jalen Hurts runs the ball, he runs very smart. He gets down, he knows how to gain those extra yards. So for me, that if we include Jalen Hurts, I think it equals it out. I don't think the Eagles be better. I think it actually equals it out. But if we're talking just strictly running backs on the in the ground, 100% going 49ers. Um, you brought up Jalen Hurts, but we'll get to the quarterback room last. Receivers and tight ends. We'll do tight ends real quick because I think it'll be a fairly quick one. Tight ends, I'm
Yeah,
going George Kittle
it's the
over
Eagles.
Dallas
No, I'm
Goedert.
kidding.
I would go Kittle over Dallas Goedert just because I believe Kittle is better in all aspects of the game. But Dallas Goedert is probably top 5 in my opinion, tight end.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's a similar ranking to me. Kittle, second best tight end right now in football. Amazing route runner, amazing blocker. And I think obviously a lot of people that don't necessarily watch the 49ers a lot or look at the 49ers film a lot don't necessarily understand the value of George Kittle because the way he blocks is amazing. Early in the year, a lot of people complained, man, George Kittle isn't being used right, or man, George Kittle isn't doing much right now. When he had only like 30 yards in his first game and not necessarily the strongest start to the season receiving wise, but when you saw what he did in the blocking game, you'd understand, damn, George Kittle is really doing his thing here. And so I think that that's important. I think George Kittle is a guy who just provides so much value in that aspect. And obviously, as a route runner, we saw it last week. We've seen it over the second half of the season when he's gotten a lot of touchdowns. An amazing route runner for his size and for with the speed that he has. Great route runner. Kittle, he's the guy. But Dallas Goedert, the reason that some fans might be a little not necessarily hesitant, but some people you do got to give the credit to Dallas Goedert. Goddard would have been a Pro Bowler if not for that. If not for his injury, I think he probably would have made it over TJ Hawkinson. But regardless, he's a top 5 tight end in the NFL. I think, yeah, top 5 tight end in the NFL right now. And he's a very valuable asset in Philly. Philly utilizes their tight ends a good amount, and they struggled when Goddard was out with the injury offensively. He's a huge part of that, and San Francisco is going to have to find a way to neutralize him like they neutralized Dalton Schultz last week.
Absolutely agree. Going to receiver room. Now, I'm going to put this in, I'm going to say receiver room, but I'm not going to say just in terms of actual receivers, right? Because if we do actual receivers, I think like in terms of like route running, receiving yards and stuff like that, it'll probably be Philadelphia, but then that takes away from who Debo
Debo
Samuel
Samuel.
is. And I know
Right.
we had this debate on Twitter, or you tweeted out your top 6 list of.
But what Marco was saying as he comes back is earlier this week, we had a conversation about the top receivers in the playoffs remaining, and we talked about purely as receivers. And in that list, controversial or not to you guys, I personally believe that the list went Jamar Chase at 1, AJ Brown at 2. At number 3 was Brandon Ayuk. When you're talking purely receiver skills, 4 was T. Higgins, 5 was Devontae Smith, and then 6 was Debo Samuel. But when we're gonna talk about the wide receiver rooms on its own, we've got to talk about the wide receiver room as a whole, and we've got to talk about what does that mean. We've got to talk about the entirety of the entirety of the skill sets of all those 6 receivers. That's important because Debo Samuel, he's a receiver, but he also coined himself the wide back. Why? Because so much of Debo's value comes not only as after like as a running back, but also after the catch and also at the line of scrimmage. Debo Samuel had his lowest average depth of target this year, but Debo Samuel still was really impactful when he got the ball. So Marco, I was just explaining essentially the value of Debo Samuel and really why it's important to distinguish that when we talked about that receiver list earlier this week and purely as a receiver, why it went out, why I said my list the way that it did, because Debo Samuel, so much of his value comes as a runner or comes after the catch when he gets balls at the line of scrimmage. But let's talk about this uh, ranking now in a way. Which receiver room's better when taking in the entirety of their skill sets? It's going to be a tough one because you got top wide receivers on both sides. What do you think?
When talking about the entirety of everything, I'm gonna go 49ers receiving room, right? And the reason is has nothing to do with the 49ers being better or more dominant as receivers. I think Brandon Ayuk is probably gonna put his name in the top 10 category next year. Like that's how good of a receiver he is. I think his target rate is gonna go up. I think they're gonna start utilizing him more for what he is. Um, but it's Debo Samuel, man. What Debo Samuel does, um, as a runner with the ball in his hands, I think you have to lean Debo Samuel because he is a legit weapon. Now, I think AJ Brown and Devonta Smith are hell of a receivers, but then when you go to the number 3 receiver, the 49ers number 3 receiver is a great blocker. Jawan Jennings comes in clutch. I think he is better than the Eagles number 3 receiver, which is I believe um, Quez Watkins, I believe, or or Zach Pascal, I believe. Those are their two other running receivers, I believe. So when you look at the depth and everything, I think the 49ers receiving group is deeper than the Philadelphia Eagles. So for me, I have to go 49ers because of Debo Samuel's ability to take a bubble screen 85 yards to the house. He could do that on any play. He could take a pitch from Brock Purdy 75 yards. Jawan Jennings comes in clutch on third downs. And that's not even including what Brandon Ayuk could do. Now, AJ Brown, I think he's a top 10 receiver in the NFL, possibly top 5, depending on what year you look at, because a lot of times people will rank based off a year, because at the end of the day, players get better, players get worse. So for me, I think right now he is a top 10 receiver in the NFL. I think Devonta Smith is around the 20-25 range, but it all comes down to depth. And I think the 49ers are a bit deeper because of Jennings is better than their third receiver and Debo's ability to go freaking 85 yards on a bubble screen.
Yeah. I mean, you see it here, third and Juwan. That's why you coined him the nickname. And I think this one's one more of those really tough ones because I personally am a huge fan of AJ Brown and his game. I think he's underrated. And here's how I'll put it. If AJ Brown was in the 49ers offense, I would not be surprised if we saw AJ Brown doing what Debo Samuel did, and maybe
Facts.
even to a higher extent because AJ Brown has the body and the size and really the what do you call it? The skill set that Debo Samuel has. It's just he doesn't run the football in Philly. He doesn't get the bubble screens as much in Philly and things like that. He's used differently in Philly, and we've seen AJ Brown as a wide receiver, an elite route runner for his size, and really got good deep speed while also being amazing at the catch point. So we've seen the entirety of the skill set of AJ Brown, but we have to evaluate in this situation. The other factor that I got to talk about that I'm not going to include in my ranking that makes it tougher is the postseason. What do I mean by that? The postseason imposes a different level of physicality. The postseason prioritizes the value of a player like Debo Samuel. Why? Because when you need that play to happen, when that physicality is coming down, and when players are getting tired at the end of the game, when it's that game that matters, you got guys like Debo Samuel to help you win that game. We've also seen the way that Debo Samuel has closed games out. Green Bay, he closed that game out with that 7-yard run on 3rd and 7. The 49ers called it. The what do you call it? The Cowboys game, the wild card game last year, the 23-yard touchdown that essentially ended the game for the 49ers. Those type of plays, that's where Debo Samuel has the value. Now, I'm not including that in this ranking because that's the postseason. I'm trying to just include the player in general and the wide receiver rooms in general. And that is what makes it tough. For me, right now. I think, though, I will go with the 49ers for one reason. I had Brandon Ayuk over Devontae Smith. I think that Ayuk has the slight edge over Devontae Smith, in my opinion, as well as Juwan Jennings having the slight edge over Quez Watkins, because Jennings in his role for the 49ers, I think does more than Watkins for his role with the Eagles. That's how I personally view it. I think Quez Watkins is an underrated receiver as well with that speed. He's just got pure deep speed. He is fast, fast, fast. But I do think that the 49ers have the edge with the wide receiver 2 role. Regardless of how you look at stats, I think Ayuk is just the better player overall with the route running, speed, size, the combination of his skills. And that is why I think the 49ers have the slight edge. If you go with the Eagles, totally understand. If you even think Smith is better than Ayuk, I understand. I said that in my video on Tuesday. But tough matchup. Got to go with the 49ers here in a slight edge.
Yeah, and it's not, we both don't think like it's by far 49ers. It's very close, but the
Right.
little things in the playoffs that the things that Debo does, running the ball, the yards after the catch, those little things are what push the 49ers over the edge for us. Now, I agree with everything you said. I thought AJ Brown was my receiver 1 that draft class. I wanted the 49ers to take him when they took Debo Samuel. Now I don't mind, and I don't mind the Debo Samuel pick anymore. But for a while, I was pretty upset that they took Debo Samuel over AJ Brown. I thought AJ Brown and Kyle's system, Kyle's offense would have been phenomenal. I thought he was phenomenal at Ole Miss. The main question of it all: quarterback, Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts. I'll let you go first.
I said earlier when we talked about the linebackers that might be the easiest pick, and I think that is the easiest pick. But in my opinion, no disrespect to Brock Purdy, this is the second easiest pick of the entire group. That ain't disrespectful, man. It's just how it is right now, and this is the second easiest pick of all these groupings. I think it's more so a testament to how really tight knit and how close most of these other groups are. But I think that you've got to go with Jalen Hurts here. I saw an interesting graphic earlier this week where the comparison between Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts in his last 7 games are nearly identical. And it's funny because people now start getting the unrealistic expectations that Hurts and Purdy might provide the same production in this game. Now, you do got to account Hurts was hurt for one of those games, pretty much. He did not look like himself in that New York Giants game. But regardless, when you talk about that, you can just, even if you want, just take that graphic. That discludes half of Jalen Hurts' arsenal. That discludes him as a rusher.
I pulled up the graphic for you. So pretty much, essentially, you see Manuel Aiko, right?
Yeah.
And he's talking about 7-0, passing yards per game, 234 for both of them, 234.9 for Purdy, 234 for Hurts, 66.7 completion percentage for Purdy, 65 for Hurts. Passing touchdowns to interceptions, Hurts is 10-3, Brock Purdy is 14-2. Passer rating, Brock Purdy is 116 to Jalen Hurts is 96. And then passing touchdowns plus rushing touchdowns, 17 for Jalen Hurts. And then Brock Purdy is 16. So he adds so what they did is they added the element you're going to talk about, but not completely. They added a piece of it.
The total touchdowns, right? That's where they added it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I know exactly where you're going. Where we were going with this. I wanted to make sure I said that the stats.
Right. And so that's the interesting part, right? In that they added that part, but not the other part, and that's fair because Jalen Hurts has only 22 passing touchdowns, but he also has 13 rushing touchdowns on the year, which adds, when you add up 35 total touchdowns, that's elite. That is good enough. And I mean, when you talk about the development that Hurts has seen, Hurts throws he's got the better deep ball. He throws the ball downfield with more aggressiveness than Brock Purdy, and he also completes the passes better than Brock Purdy in that regard. And this is all just him as a passer. I think Hurts right now is fairly solid as a passer, but also when you talk about the rushing impact, that is the huge difference Philadelphia's offense. Philadelphia's offense is predicated on Hurts and those legs. Hurts creates so much not only by himself but also in the zone read game because you have to respect Hurts' ability to run as a quarterback. And so to me, that's the big difference maker in this one, and that's why Hurts provides any much value. That's why you see teams trying to go out and get these quarterbacks where they might be more raw as a passer, but provide this potential at as a rusher because the dual threat ability. Got to go easily with the Eagles here.
Yeah, I agree with you. I go Eagles. And the crazy part is on those statistics that they show, they leave out, did the math real quick, they leave out 440 rushing yards. If you divide that by the 7 games, that's 62 yards. So, like, if we're being honest, so, like, the stats was 234 each on passing. If you do total yards, 234 and the 90
That's
is
nearly
290.
300 yards a game.
300 yards a game versus Brock Purdy's around that 234, maybe 240 if he rushes for 6 yards every game. He's not a rusher. So that's exactly what you're saying is they're leaving out a big part of who Jalen Hurts is. They're leaving out that rushing ability. They included in the touchdowns to make it look like a good a graphic, right? To compare the two, make them look great compared to each other. But realistically, it's not a comparison. We're talking about Jalen Hurts, who is an MVP candidate, versus Brock Purdy, who, yeah, he's excelled, but he's nowhere in Jalen Hurts' category. Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback, in my opinion, in that top 6 quarterback category this season. Brock Purdy isn't in that category. Let's tell it how it is, right?
And it's
Go
unfair
ahead.
to Purdy when you bring him up in these discussions, when you overrate him because you're setting him to unrealistic expectations, and when he doesn't meet the expectations, then it shines a bad light on Purdy. It's unfair to him to have these conversations, to have these comparisons, because it sheds an unnecessary and really invaluable kind of it sheds that type of comparison, and it also sheds that type of profile which you don't want on a guy like Purdy. You want him to just be the guy that he's been, which has been phenomenal for the 49ers when talking about the storyline. So that's kind of what I want to outline there.
Yeah, and what it does to Purdy in a sense is if Purdy goes 225 yards passing, a touchdown or two, doesn't throw any interceptions, fans are going to say he played bad. He only had 225 yards. Or let's say he throws for 198. He only had 198. He didn't even hit 200. But if the 49ers win, it doesn't matter because the game plan is going to be completely different than the game plan for Jalen Hurts. Their game plan is run the ball with Jalen Hurts, throw the ball deep. That's the kind of game plan they have. And they're not going to change it up, in my opinion. I think so. That's where things get tricky for the quarterback battle. But I do agree Jalen Hurts is the better quarterback in that aspect. Now, what do the 49ers need to do to win, and what do the Eagles need to do to win?
Oh, before that though, because I did see the pin message right now. Let's talk about the coaching. Let's talk about that, and then we'll talk about the keys to the game. Coaching experience, JB says he thinks the 49ers have it on our side because Sirianni just won his first playoff game. Would you agree with that sentiment? Talk about the coaches and the assistants because both teams are loaded with the coaching staff. Both teams, when you talk about it, Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen are both getting head coaching interviews. Anthony Lynn just got an offensive coordinator interview from the Washington Commanders, at least the request. And D'Amico Ryans right now is the odds-on favorite to win the Denver Broncos head coaching job. So.
Yeah, so it's crazy because the coaching on both sides is phenomenal. I think Nick Sirianni is a super duper good coach. I think he's embraced the Philadelphia energy and became a Philadelphia person. That's just who he is. He took on that culture and he coaches exactly how as a Philadelphia fans want him to coach, with that anger, with that aggressiveness. It's just who Philly is. But when you look at Kyle Shanahan, he built his team a certain way to play in the playoffs, run the ball, get physical. He has a defensive coach that does the same thing. Now Gannon does a lot of things very well on that side of the ball. Obviously, generating pressure and stuff like that. So you have very good defensive coordinators, very good offensive play callers. So I don't want to necessarily say that because Nick Sirianni just won his first career playoff game that he's not a good coach or Kyle Shanahan has more experience than him, because at the end of the day, Nick Sirianni is in his 3rd NFL season. Um, I believe he made the playoffs with his first year as a head coach in 2021 22, I believe, or second year. But he's been a good coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I don't want to discredit him and say Kyle's better or he's better because it's going to discredit both coaches because they're hell of a coaches. Now, where I'm going to say something and it's crazy, but I think Eagles have the advantage because they have a coach
Interesting.
on, not necessarily advantage in the coaching,
Mhm.
but they have an advantage because they have secret intel on Brock Purdy. Now, the Philadelphia Eagles have a coach by the name of DK McDonald. He is assistant
Mhm.
defensive back coach. He was on the Iowa State roster when Brock Purdy was there. So he knows Brock Purdy just as well as any coach, right? So he was around him for the I believe it was 3 years that he was there. So for me, that is a secret intel because Gannon is going to use a lot of what McDonald says to get after Brock Purdy. What was he good at in college? Because Brock Purdy he hasn't really been developed the way a team would want to develop a young quarterback. He was thrown into the fire and said, "Hey, bro, don't sink." Literally, that's what happened. Like, hey, don't sink, man. Put the fire out. We just lost Jimmy, our second quarterback. Put it out for us, and he's done that. So that's why I think they have a secret advantage, but not necessarily an advantage in the terms of who's going to be a better play caller on Sunday afternoon. I think it's a very, very even matchup, and I'm not going to say that because Nick Sirianni just won his first playoff game that Kyle is the better coach. Yes, the experience is on the 49ers side, but I don't think that is the deciding factor on why the 49ers would win.
That's interesting. Really good points there made by you. And when we talk about it, I'll go head coach and then I'll go the coordinators. When we talk about Kyle Shanahan and Nick Sirianni, each has different things that go for them. Nick Sirianni is one of the best coaches when it comes to aggressiveness. I forget the chart itself. He was one of the best when it came to fourth down decision making in terms of when to go for it and when to kick the field goal. He was the best in the NFL this year. Kyle Shanahan, we know that's not his forte. He loves the conservative route, and that's why he ranked amongst the middle of the pack in those go-to situations. Sirianni ranks amongst the highest in the NFL with the coaching staff. What does that mean? He's clearly not aggressive, and despite him being a younger head coach and a like with less experience, he has shown that he has the tendency to make the right decisions in those situations. Now, Sirianni has also been vital in the development of Jalen Hurts. We've seen it. He's made a system tailored to Hurts's setting, or really Hurts's skill set, and made Hurts into a really good. Not made. I'm not going to say that, but really helped develop Hurts into a really solid passer. The development from year two, right? Year two, or was he? No, the year one last year, right? Or
So last year for Jalen Hurts was, I believe, his
no, first year as a
sec-
starter, but year
first year
two,
as a starter,
right?
but it was his second year. I believe he is in his third
Yeah,
season, but realistically, he didn't get to play until
too much.
his
Yeah.
second season because of I believe it was Carson Wentz there.
Wentz, yeah.
Yeah.
So when we talk about it, the jump from starting year one to starting year two is huge. From this past year to this year, it's huge, and you credit Sirianni for that. Now, Kyle Shanahan, I'm probably higher on him than other people. I think Kyle Shanahan is a very good head coach. I think he's one of the best head coaches in the NFL and one of the best play callers in the NFL, which is also Sirianni's bread and butter. To me, though, I think that this matchup is a draw. I would give the edge to Shanahan, but I don't want to discredit Sirianni with that, like you're saying. With the coordinators, though, I do think D'Amico Ryans has the advantage. Jonathan Gannon is an interesting coordinator. He's a good coordinator, and both of them, there's a reason why they're both the finalists for the job in the Houston with the Houston Texans. I think though D'Amico Ryans is a little better with the adjustments, and I also think D'Amico Ryans is a little better in the timing, in the understanding of game planning. And what do I mean by that? Gannon, first of all, he loves quarters coverage. The one thing that I've seen, he loves quarters coverage, and he has a tendency for that. And why do I think that that's not the best? Quarters coverage is good. Quarters coverage, quarter,
Shanahan.
half, the way that the Eagles use. But you got two of the best man-to-man coverage quarterbacks in the NFL, and Gannon loves to drop them into zone coverage and have them cover a quarter or half of the field, or sorry, like their quarters of the field. To me, that's invaluable and not utilizing your resources to the best, especially when you have that defensive line and can trust the cornerbacks to play man coverage with Devontae Maddox as well in the slot. D'Amico Ryans, while he does drop his guys back, they play cover three a lot. Well, while he does drop his guys back a good amount, I think he makes the proper adjustments. And it's not only even with their cornerbacks. I mean, you've seen him understand that the defensive or the offensive line is going to have a certain shift in protection, and so he'll drop one guy back where he was initially going to rush, and then that creates a hole, and you got a blitzer there, and so you're still only rushing 4 or 5, but you've got a different set of things, and I think D'Amico Ryans does that better than any coordinator in the NFL. Now, offensive coordinator-wise, Shane Steichen is he's very talented, and he's going to be a good head coach, it seems like, at the moment. I think that the Eagles get the edge there. Overall, coaching-wise, I got to give it to the 49ers, the reason being Kyle Shanahan is the offensive coordinator. He's the head coach and offensive coordinator. I rule him in that world, and I think that Kyle Shanahan is there. I said I'd give him the slight advantage over the Sirianni, and I think Ryans has the advantage over Jonathan Gannon. That's why I go with the 49ers.
Yeah, and I get what you're saying about the Gannon and the aspect of he doesn't utilize his man-to-man coverage the right way, right? Like you're saying, you have Darius Slay, bro, man him up all game long. To me, now this is going into the keys of the game, right? Because
Let's do it.
If you're the 49ers, you definitely want to have them play you in a zone, because then it takes them out of their element, because now you're forcing them to actually tackle, right? Like you're forcing them to do things they don't want to do. And that's why they're not good tacklers. When these guys you have man-to-man corners like Darius Slay and James Bradbury, they're not going to be good tacklers because they're great in coverage. Like you pay them for one thing, and that's to cover. I don't care what else they do. If they cover great, have them cover great. He doesn't do that. He puts them in situations that put him in no man's land, essentially. And I think if he mans them up on the 49ers receivers, like Dallas did, I thought Dallas did a great job of taking away the number one read for Brock Purdy. It kind of had Brock bailing out too soon. It had Brock wanting to take off. So if he could do that, essentially the 49ers are going to struggle offensively, because that means you're stacking the box, taking away the run, and you're forcing them. You're forcing Debo to beat man coverage, which he's not the best at beating man coverage unless he's running crossing routes. He's not going to beat you downfield, or he's going to beat you on whip routes. The little things that he does good. Brandon Ayuk is going to win those one-on-one matchups, but not consistently enough that he showed to be able to do last week. Now, he does it. He could do it at a high level, but it's not consistent. Now, to me, that's one of the keys of the game. If Philadelphia plays man coverage more often, or if they do disguise looks that make it like a cover 2 man, or you're running a lot of buzz stuff, right? You're able to essentially take things away from Kyle Shanahan. But then Kyle Shanahan's going to hit you back with, okay, you want to play man? Well, guess what? Cover Debo on a crossing route and tackle him after. Because guess what? If he gets the ball in his hands, see ya. You're not tackling him. So that's where it starts getting nitpicky on what's going to happen. I think the 49ers got to stick with the run offensively, even if it's not working. I said that last week against Dallas. You got to stick with the run, even if it's not working, because those blows are going to pay off in the fourth quarter, in the third quarter, when playoff games are won. And I think that's where Jonathan Gannon might struggle on his timing up his blitzes and playing man coverage.
Yeah. And I think we got a good comment here that Zach just put in. Keys of the game we're talking about. Niners need to run down their throats at least 35 plus times and have to contain Hurts to have a chance. Do you agree with both of these sentiments, that the Niners need to run down their throats at least 35 times and have to contain Hurts? What do you think?
I would say yes on containing Jalen Hurts, because I said it in the space earlier. I said a key to the game definitely is keeping your rush integrity, in the sense of, if you get out of your rush lane, Jalen Hurts will beat you in the run game. Now, if you keep him in the pocket and force him to be a pocket quarterback, he is a hell of a pocket quarterback, but now you're taking away one of his best attributes, which is running the football. So I think that is a way you could essentially beat the Eagles. If you take away on offense, you take away Jalen Hurts' rushing lanes. And I don't think you have to put a spy on him, because I see a lot of people saying put a spy on him. Well, yeah, if you put a spy on him, and if you're in zone coverage or man coverage, you have someone that is pretty much covering
They're
grass.
in that lane. They're right in the middle of the field. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't like putting spies on people too often, because you're covering grass. covering grass, you're pretty much in no man's land in the NFL. I personally think you got to be either covering a zone or you're covering a man. Now, if you're covering Jalen Hurts, then it's one of those ones where if the rush lane integrity goes away, then yes, it's great because that guy is able to break and go get him as soon as Jalen Hurts starts to bail.
Mhm.
But for me, I think I don't think 35 rushes is gonna win you the game. I think you're gonna have to you're gonna run the ball 30 times, but you're gonna have to throw the ball at least 25 to 30 times too. So you're gonna have to be able to throw the ball to be able to move the ball because I think they're gonna sell out and take away the run. I think Gannon and Sirianni are gonna force Kyle Shanahan to beat them with Brock Purdy.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And I think Zach brings up a good point. You need to contain Hurts. And the way that you do that, I think the 49ers have to figure that out. Because if you don't contain Hurts, that's going to cause a problem. The 49ers have seen it before with those mobile quarterbacks. That's important. And I think about the 35 times, I will push back a lot on that. Not a lot, but I will push back on that number. I think they need to run down their throats. I like the game plan that they've set up the last 2 weeks in that they've passed a lot in the first half. 19, I believe, to 10 in one game in the Seattle Seahawks game, 19 to 11 in the Dallas Cowboys game. And then they've looked
Yeah.
more run centric in the second half. Ran the ball over 20 times in both games as opposed to I think 10 or less passes in both games. So they've had a game plan where they've looked to stretch vertically in the first half, looked to try and take advantage of the opportunities. And also the point is you have 8 or 9 in the box at times, 7, 8, 9 in the box. What do you do when there's that many in the box? Try and stretch vertically and create those advantages. Now, it will be tougher, obviously, against a Philly defense that can get to the quarterback earlier because of the amount of talent they have on the defensive line. But if the 49ers can maintain the game plan that they've had the past 2 games while executing at a higher level than they did against Dallas, then I think that they're going to have a good shot at running down their throats, especially in the second half when the teams are getting more tired, because that's what they've done. And you have the powerful guys like Elijah Mitchell and Deebo Samuel to fulfill that role for the 49ers, as well, obviously, as Christian McCaffrey. So I do think that you should run for the for reference, the rushing totals in the past 2 games, 32 rushes, 33 rushes. So it's right up on that 35 number. I think the goal for the 49ers should be 30. I know Kyle Shanahan has said it before that his goal is 30 rushes in a game. I don't really care too much how many yards per carry it is, even if it's only 3.5, because we saw in Dallas, it was what I think at the end it was only 3.5. That second half rushing, they didn't rush really that effectively, under 4 yards per carry, but still, it made an impact in the game. You could see that the 49ers were moving when they were finally blocking well, finally running at the Dallas Cowboys. Even if it was short gains, they were able to make a difference, sustain these longer drives, and get scoring points. So I like the thought process here with both of those keys.
So I had a coach back in the day, Coach Ralph. Shout out to him, one of the best coaches I've ever had. A great offensive minded guy. So he goes and tells me, right? He goes, picking his head, right? Like, how do things go? As a play caller, what are you looking for? He goes, well, my run game, every play I need at least 3.5 yards per run. He goes, that's the least amount. He goes, my run game's gonna get more than that because I know how to set up runs. I know how to call
Right.
plays. He goes, but the reason why I need 3.5 is because if I'm getting 3.5, he goes, it's like paper cutting you constantly. 3.5 is if I run the ball on first and second down and I'm getting 3.5, you're telling me I'm 3rd and 3 roughly because you're 3.5 yards. That's 7 yards on 2 plays. He goes, so 3rd and 3. He goes, my odds to pick up 3 yards on 3rd and 3 are a lot higher. So you're telling me if you can't stop
Right.
that, I'm going to go away from it. He goes, it's a paper cut. I'm going to paper cut you all game long until you can stop those 3.5 yards. I'm going to keep doing it. So for like you're saying, Kyle should not go away from it because those are the little things that get defenses frustrated. Is damn 3.5 yards instead of second and 10, second and 9, it's second and 7, or second and 6, second and 7. Those are much different play calling because now you got to defend a lot more variety of plays that could be called. Now, what do you think at the end of the day is going to happen? Essentially, the 49ers, the Eagles, what are the key things that end up making them victorious and who's victorious Sunday?
I think the key things, number one, you've got to start with what we just talked about, the run game. The run game is going to be huge for both sides. The 49ers need to have a successful run game. The Eagles need to have a successful run game. Why? It's part of both of their formulas. The 49ers run the ball well. The Eagles are a top 5 rushing unit in the NFL this year. And it's also part of their philosophies in the playoffs. You saw how well the Eagles ran last week. I think it was in excess of 200 yards, almost 250 yards last week. While the 49ers, they've run 32 and 33 times in their 2 playoff games. So I think that that's going to be important. But also, it's the explosive plays. In the playoffs, you need 1 or 2 explosive plays sometimes in a defensive showdown, and that's going to help you win the game. For the 49ers, they only had 1 true explosive play last week. It was that George Kittle bobble catch that ended up happening that really pushed them downfield. What happened as a result of that? The 49ers got their lone touchdown of the game. That 1 touchdown was the difference against the Cowboys. The explosive plays, whichever team can really limit the explosive plays while also generating the more turnovers, I think that that's important. The last thing with the turnovers, when I talk about them, why are they important? The 49ers now have had 12 games this year where they've had a turnover battle, where they've won the turnover battle, had a higher turnover differential than their opponent. In each of their 12 games, they've had a winning result. It's clear. You win the turnover battle, you win the game. 49ers need to do that. If the Eagles want to win, they need to do that as well.
I agree with you. I think 49ers defensively, I think D'Amico Ryans needs to do a great job of keeping Jalen Hurts from running and doing everything possible. The moment he starts scrambling, the moment he starts doing things with his legs, is the moment the 49ers defense is going to be in for a long night. And what I mean by that is those third and sixes, when they're converted because of Jalen Hurts' legs, it's going to happen. But if it's happening consistently, where it happens 2 or 3 times, 4 times, that's what kind of gets at the defense. You can start seeing the defense get frustrated. You can see D'Amico get frustrated. So the biggest thing is to prevent Jalen Hurts from running the football. There's no other way to say it. If you could get him to be a pure pocket passer, keep him under 20 yards rushing in the total game, I think they'll be fine. Now,
I agree.
When he starts to break off and you're in your a deep cover 3 or in your, I know he likes to run cover 4 every once in a while. When you get into those and he picks up 10 to 15 yards, those are killer. Those are killer. So I think keeping Jalen Hurts in the pocket offensively, utilize George Kittle in the pass game against these linebackers. Now,
fair.
They're probably going to put C.J. Gardner-Johnson on them every once in a while. Probably put Avonte Maddox, who's pretty solid against tight ends, on him. But using George Kittle in the passing game against these guys is going to be the biggest thing to success, because the run game is going to be probably stagnant the way I expect Philly to play the 49ers. Completely stuff the run, force Brock Purdy to beat you with his arm, and when it comes to passing downs, you're probably going to send someone, because Brock Purdy is pretty solid when it comes to 4-man pressures. So when you're only sending 4, he is one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, actually. But also too, he hasn't played a defensive line like Philadelphia. So I think doing that, and I think as you're making Brock Purdy throw the ball and beat them, you got to use Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle at the same time. Not necessarily purely Christian. There you go. I wouldn't necessarily say linebackers, but I'm saying like Christian McCaffrey and screens.
Use him in general.
Against
use him in general.
The defensive line wants to get after the quarterback. They want to get after the quarterback. They want 7-8 sacks a game. Screen the living crap out of that defensive line.
Force those edges to kick out. Yeah.
Yep, because now you have defensive line trying to stop the screen, heads on a swivel, trying to stop the screen rather than getting after the quarterback. And that's where you generate more time for your young quarterback. So I think if Kyle Shanahan could do that, they could have success. Now, the main question everyone wants to know: who wins on Sunday, Rohan?
Who wins on Sunday? Now, this is the $1 million question, and the question that will likely get my head chopped off by one team's fan base. And unfortunately, at the moment, I think I've got to stick to what I said earlier this week. And that means my head is going to be chopped off by our fan base and whoever's in the chat. At the moment, I've got the Eagles. It's unfortunate, but at the moment, I've got the Eagles.
So do I kick him out now or do I kick him out later?
Let me explain and then you can kick me. But the Eagles right now, the reason I say it, I said it earlier this year. Week 12, 13, whatever it was, with Ryan Hensley, I said they're the toughest matchup for the 49ers. Why? We just essentially elaborated exactly why. We went through matchup by matchup and we talked about the most important positions: defensive line, offensive line, quarterback. We talked about the important positions and I illustrated why I have the Eagles in some of those important matchups. At the moment, they are the better team, and I wonder how this game goes. I very well would not be shocked if it's the 49ers. We talked about how close of a game this should be. And right now, though, I do think it's the Eagles. It seems right now like America's the best Super Bowl for football, 49ers Chiefs. But right now, I think it's the Bengals Eagles that ends up happening.
I agree. But I don't agree.
Say what?
I agree, but I don't agree.
Okay.
So, as a 49ers fan, I say 49ers are going to win this game, right? By 3. But as someone who likes to analyze football and talk sports in general, I think Philadelphia is one of the most complete teams in the NFL. And the reason they're more complete than the 49ers right now is because of the quarterback situation. Because it's Brock Purdy. And I'm not saying Brock Purdy has played bad. I'm not saying Brock Purdy isn't good. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying Brock Purdy's not the answer. We don't know yet. That's a conversation for another episode in the offseason. That's funny. What I'm saying is, when you have the best offensive line like the Philadelphia Eagles do, they're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to be able to throw the ball because they have time. They could actually navigate, open up rush lanes for Miles Sanders and Jalen Hurts and the running backs they have. Now, their defensive line is very damn good. I haven't seen Brendel do well against guys like Fletcher Cox or
I agree. That's huge.
Hargrave. Fletcher Cox against Jake Brendel, in my opinion, is going to be the deciding factor in a way, because if the 49ers run game is struggling because Fletcher Cox, Ndamukong Suh, and Hargrave are dominating the trenches inside, that's where the 49ers are going to struggle. And I think it's a 50-50 toss-up. I think it's going to be a 3-point game going either way, but Philadelphia has the quarterback on their side, that Jalen Hurts. They have the offensive line, which is phenomenal. They have a great defensive line. Now, the 49ers have a great defense, a great offensive line, good receivers. They have everything.
Right.
But they're just playing with the most complete team. So, and you got to go to Philadelphia in the most. I think Philadelphia in the playoffs is probably the best atmosphere in any sports outside of Levi Stadium. But their fan base is just different. It's
Philly.
different, right? Like the 49ers fan base is amazing. But the Philadelphia fan base, they're on.
When you hear how much they turn on their own teams, now imagine how much they turn on other teams. That's how I'll put it.
Dude, they turn on their team so fast, but the thing is, like, they are quick to turn on their team, but when their team is winning, that's how fast and how crazy they are about their team. They're quick to say, hey, Jalen Hurts was a bust. They were quick to say that. But now that he's the dude, they are behind him. Dude, that stadium is going to be rocking. It's going to be so loud. I think it's going to be a very, very good game that comes down to the last couple of minutes of that game. And I think Philadelphia comes on top by 3. That's me talking as someone who talks sports. But if the 49er fan in me says 49ers win by 3.
I think that's fair.
So I think we did a great job of going over, and they're not going to like the answer, but it's all right. I know the people are going to say, we're crazy, but I thought Philadelphia was the favorite to win the Super Bowl after like week 13. Like, that's how good they are. I think they're going to win the Super Bowl if they get past us. That's just how good they are. I think they match up fairly well with any team in the playoffs, and I know so do you. So I'm sorry, 49er fans, if you guys get upset about us, upset with us about what we just said. We're just trying to keep it real with you guys. We're not trying to sugarcoat anything.
Yeah, and I like the response here from PJ to end today's show. Respect the answer. It's going to be our toughest game. That's all we're saying. It's going to be the toughest game, and like I said, would be very wouldn't be at all surprised if either team wins this one. That's why we're in the championship. That's how these matchups are. Same with the other matchup, the AFC one.
Absolutely. Two good teams. 49ers got to go on the road. They got to play in a hostile environment with a young rookie quarterback. That is where it gets very chippy. Remember, Jalen Hurts has championship caliber in college. He was in those championship caliber games. So he has experience there. He has experience on the big stage. So that's where it gets, that's us continuing the conversation and going deeper. But I thought we done a great job. Thank you everyone for
Yeah.
tuning in. Shout out to Zach. Shout out to Snowboat. Shout out to PJ. Callie in the house. Shout out to everyone that was tuned in. Make sure you guys go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to both channels. They're in the description. Make sure you follow both of us on Instagram, Twitter. I want to say Instagram at Marco_Mart1205 at Rohan Chakrav. I appreciate every single one of you guys for being in here for a whole hour and 20 minutes with us. Thank you guys and have a blessed weekend. Have a great Friday tomorrow. We're out.
Peace out.